Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Patrick Kellerman, Vice President of Research at the Bay Area Council's Economic Institute, and we're pleased to have you here today for the California Experience, Lessons from 20 Years of a Paid Family Leave Program. This is the latest report from the Economic Institute with support from the Blue Shield of California Foundation. And we're pleased to have you here with our lovely panel of very experienced and very distinguished guests. As the longest standing paid family leave program in the nation, California's PFL program has provided us a unique view into the impacts and effectiveness that paid family leave programs can have and critical lessons for developing programs in other states and nations. We're pleased to welcome former State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, and author of SB 1383 last year, Xiomara Pena, Vice President from Small Business Majority and a member of the Governor's Task Force, David Rattray, President and CEO of Unite LA, also a member of the task force. Rachel Wick, Senior Program Officer, Blue Shield of California Foundation and lead for their Economic Security Program. And Matt Regan, Senior Vice President of Public Policy at a little organization I work at called the Bay Area Council, also a member of the Governor's Task Force last year. And so with that, I'll pass it to Rachel Wick for an introduction from the Blue Shield of California Foundation. Rachel.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here this morning and thrilled to be talking about paid family leave. We are in a moment right now, I think, in our state, in our country, and in this pandemic that has really illustrated for us how critical paid family leave is to our families and our communities. Blue Shield of California Foundation's mission is to support lasting and equitable solutions that can make California the healthiest state and to end domestic violence. We believe paid family leave is essential to the health of workers and their families. A strong paid family leave program offers families the security and flexibility they need to remain in the workforce while also caring for their families and keeping them healthy and safe. And as this report shows, paid family leave has a direct impact on health outcomes and the safety of survivors of domestic violence. In California, we have so much to be proud of when it comes to our paid family leave program. In many ways, the conversation today is a celebration for all the progress that we've made. We're one of the few states in the country that's established a program like this, and we've continued to make improvements to make sure that the program reaches all workers and all families. As the report suggests, there is still more work that needs to be done to ensure that paid family leave is accessible for all Californians. We see persistent gaps in leave taking among low-wage workers, many of whom are people of color. And the report offers recommendations that can help get us to equity, addressing barriers such as wage replacement, job tenure requirements, and employer exemptions. We can and should work to close these gaps through state policy. At the same time, we're standing on the precipice right now of potentially establishing the first federal paid family leave program, which could have an extraordinary impact on families in California and across the country. It's a privilege for me to be here today with this esteemed panel of leaders who have been the champions for paid family leave in California. And we believe a key part of the success, and the report shows this, has been bridging leadership between the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. It's a critical moment for us, as Patrick said, to lift up California's progress, to show what's possible, and also to show what else needs to be done to ensure that paid leave policy truly advances health, racial, and gender equity for all Californians and communities across the country. So thank you again, Patrick, and your colleagues at the Bay Area Council for bringing this important research and its findings to light at really a seminal moment, and for convening us in this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. One little housekeeping note. I'm going to give a short presentation of the report's findings and what we aim to discover here, followed by a Q&A with our great panel. So please put any questions you have into the Q&A box, not the chat, and we'll do our best to get to as many of those as we can. The Q&A box just helps us filter through them and keep everything flowing nicely. So with that, I'm going to share a short presentation we have here. I promise I won't over talk to you because I know sometimes these things go long and folks really want to get to the panel of experts and not me, the one who stays in the basement writing reports. But again, this is up on our website live now, and we have a whole variety and host of resources. There's the full report, there's an executive summary, and we aim to get this out there as far and wide as possible. So please use it however you see fit. Please ask us if you have questions, if you need charts, if you'd like us to join you on a webinar. I speak for myself, and I'm sure the other panelists that we're all in this together and really hoping to get this out as far and wide as possible. This latest report is actually expanding on a series of work that the Economic Institute has conducted over the past several years. Beginning with our Workplace Connections report that really began to explore the ties between, as Rachel mentioned, gender equity, family-friendly policies, early childhood care and education. These things are all tied into each other, and so we encourage you to check that out. Last year, we were very lucky through Matt and the administration to secure a sort of once in a lifetime, I've called it several times, data set from the EDD that allowed us to author the middle report here, an evaluation of the California Paid Family Leave Program. Many of those insights gleaned are in this latest report. It really is just a wealth of information, findings that really wouldn't have been able to be explored in any other way. And so we encourage you to check that out. And then, as I said, live on our website is this latest report. So, we really aim to have this be a unique effort to understand the how and why of California's successes. We believe that it was important to explore California's experience from beginning to end, but also across several important areas that we don't see mentioned as often in reports like these, which are often an analysis of effectiveness and other things, but really don't get into the political nature, the advocacy discussions, the evolution of a program along the way. And so we really intended this to be a kind of one-stop report for folks in other states or folks working federally to understand California's program, understand its strengths and weaknesses, and understand how to move forward both here and elsewhere. We've got 4 fantastic sections here. We go through the history, structure, and financing of California's program. Then, again, this fantastic analysis of statewide data, which dives even deeper here than our original report. Lessons really from many of the folks on this panel, but a whole host of others in their experience enacting Senator Jackson's most recent expansion in job-protected leave. And then finally, a set of recommendations. Again, as Rachel mentioned, I mean, we believe that there's always room to be moving forward. And so after a thorough evaluation of this program, we're happy to present a set of recommendations here. There are a variety of other states that have paid family leave programs. California's was effectively the first in the nation nearly 20 years ago next year. But since then, other states are experimenting and evolving with a variety of different structures, which is, what you like to see, especially when informing a federal policy. So we have a really great appendix in this report that goes through all the different details in each of these states and what they're doing. Here is a quick list and map of those states. Some actually have leave that's longer or more generous than California. So we're no longer, you might call ours the most comprehensive and especially in terms of how it's administered. But, there's a lot of states doing a lot of really great work. And so it's important to highlight that too. As Rachel mentioned, one of the big findings from our last report was, and is informative throughout this, is that the share of men taking leave has increased. And so, ideally this would be equal. We want everyone to be utilizing this as much as they can. And so this is a really great sign for the future. We also, however, still notice very significant differences in earning quartiles by claim category. So you'll notice that especially among women, the lowest earning quartile are by far the least represented leave takers in this not even sample. This was actually all of the paid family leave records. And so, this is largely a result of a few things. We found that it's both education, it's informing, it's getting the word out. It's also folks who are working at smaller businesses, some of which are not covered yet. And it's also low reimbursement rates, which don't allow, the lower income and individuals of color among us to be able to take leave. And so we hope that, that we can see these numbers equal out over the coming years. Another thing that we were very proud and that we've heard, and I think we'll hear about more from the panel to analyze was, this data set allowed us through EDD again to connect to wage data and firm data. And so we were allowed to analyze what the impact of leave taking was on businesses. And so a few interesting findings here, but there are more throughout the report, which we encourage you to read. But workers at larger firms, not surprisingly, were both overrepresented in participation, and among higher earnings per worker, those firms who are paying more have higher rates of leave taking. Industries with generally higher wages see higher rates of leave taking. Again, not a surprise. However, what was a surprise are these next three. So exit rates, defined as basically a firm failing or ceasing operations, did not appear to be impacted by leave use on the whole. And in fact, small firms experienced a decrease in wage costs when workers took leave. We talked to a few folks about this, and we think that's because other employees are able to fill in, small business owners and founders fill in, that type of thing. So that's another really great finding, that the impacts at the smallest business levels really aren't significant in any of the data that we find. Our research also found that paid leave increased labor force attachment. So the likelihood that individuals who take leave return to their jobs and are able to in a productive manner is a very important, both for our economy moving forward and for the careers of the residents and citizens of California. Our report ends with a host of recommendations. California's program has been around for a while. It's been updated a handful of times. Many of those updates were big and generous and important, but there's always work to be done. We found that ensuring wage replacement rates, effectively making them higher for the lowest wage workers, would probably go a long way to encourage full program utilization. Job protection eligibility requirements that accommodated a wider range of employment situations would help folks feel the confidence they need to take leave among those, still on the fence about whether or not they want to risk their job or career to take leave. We don't want to have folks put in that situation. In California, public employees are still not eligible to take leave. So one of the recommendations from the task force and the recommendations here were to consider expanding that to public employees. Resources, this is what I was talking about earlier. Resources for the implementation and outreach of educational programs aimed at improving participation would go a long way among lower wage workers and those employed at small businesses. Knowledge is power, and many folks we find don't actually know that they're aware of and actually paying for themselves the ability to take leave. And then I joked earlier that this was kind of a once in a lifetime pull from the California Unemployment Development Department, but that shouldn't be the case. So whether it be in California, other states, or nationally, to the extent we can modernize or develop from the start administrative systems that allow for data collection, research and analysis by both in-house, public sector staff and outside experts in the nonprofit and academia sectors, that would go a long way to continuing to modify, update, and adjust these programs so that they work well for everyone. And with that, I'm going to introduce for a, there we go, sorry. With that, I'm going to turn it over to former State Senator Beth Jackson, who was so kind to join us today to give us a little bit of her perspective on an issue she's worked on for a very long time, and including last year's passage of additional protections. Senator Jackson.
Thank you so much for including me in this wonderful event. And I first want to give a big shout out to you and to the Bay Area Council for this wonderful report. Wonderful for a number of reasons, but from a political perspective, where I have spent far too many years of my life, it's very clear that what you expose here, or what you confirm, is the fact that paid family leave and programs which acknowledge people, workers, employees as human beings with lives outside of their work. The fact that we recognize that people have needs beyond the workplace really is good for business. And one of the key issues that I have dealt with throughout the time that I have worked on this issue, which is probably more than a decade, is the fact that businesses have been very reluctant to accommodate, to participate, to encourage, to support this kind of legislation. The fear, of course, being that if workers take time off, they become less productive, companies suffer. And then from the workers' perspective, the fear that if they take that time off, they're going to lose their jobs. So this report makes it very clear, something that I think many of us knew, and many of us know intuitively, that when we recognize that people don't live to work, they work to live. And the needs that people have to accommodate their families, their own well-being, whether it's their physical health, and of course in this post-COVID world, we have to recognize mental health. I shouldn't say post-COVID, we're still sadly deep in it, but that mental health is also an issue. So what we did with this bill, and recognizing that California, we did this first, and California, we like to be first. We don't necessarily have to do it best, but we like to do it first. And there are other states, as you mentioned, that have expanded the program. But we were the first, and the California version requires the employee to pay for their leave. Not sharing with the employer, but the employee pays all of the cost of this program by taking a small percentage out of the unemployment insurance that we all see coming out of our paychecks, and it goes into a sequestered fund, which is then made available for this leave. And I think that's important too, because business has been both a supporter and one of our biggest obstacles in creating this program. So we now have a program that we've expanded to include a definition of family, which is more consistent with the 21st century and the fact that California is the second most multi-generational state in the country, meaning we have more families where different generations are living together and providing assistance for each other. So we expanded that definition to include in-laws, to include siblings, to include let's see, we've got siblings, grandparents, grandchildren, domestic partners. So it really does try to recognize those needs. We also recognize the fact that people won't take the leave, particularly lower income people, without a reimbursement rate. So we know that if you're making minimum wage, that isn't enough to cover even to cover today's expenses, but to only be getting a smaller percentage, 50, 60, 70%, discourages a lot of people from taking that leave. There's a bill on the governor's desk this year that will expand that leave, particularly for lower income workers, up to 90%, which we think will again encourage people to participate. The biggest challenge that we had in the bill that was sort of my end of legislative career was the bill that provides for job protection. People can get paid leave up to 8 weeks now in California, but if your job isn't guaranteed when you return, people aren't taking the leave. So this legislation we got passed last year, literally with 3 minutes left to go in the session, that now allows for individuals to take up to 12 weeks of job protected leave. Now, it's not paid, so that you get up to 8 weeks of paid leave and can take an additional 4, being assured that your job is still there for you when you end your leave. And the leave can be taken serially. It doesn't have to be taken all at once. Given today's world, and of course, since post-COVID or since the COVID world, we're seeing people really needing to be able to address not only family issues, but their own health and also their mental health, which I think is something that we need to address going forward once we're out of this terrible situation. So I know I was given 7 minutes and I forgot to put my timer on. I don't know if I've gone beyond that. If I have, would you let me know? Because I do have a couple more thoughts about things that we need to do going forward. We still have a legislative mandate that we have to pursue, and that is, again, making sure that people are able to take the leave, making sure that everybody is able to take some form of leave. If you're an employee, you pay into this program, you should be able to access it. And one of the challenges last year, even though we had support from the governor down, and I will say the governor really worked hard to make that bill on job protection possible. But in spite of that, the resistance that we got from people who claimed that the small business community would suffer, and we know, thanks to your good work, that that isn't true. We had to exempt small businesses from 0 up to 5 employees from the ability to take those 12 weeks. My hope is that we can demonstrate well enough going forward, based upon your study, that small businesses are not going to be put out of business if they allow their employees to take the time. In fact, people come back, they're more loyal, they're more focused, they're healthier. It is a boon to business to give people that opportunity to recognize their needs beyond their workplace. So that's critically important. Also, the issue of domestic violence. We recognize that people who are mired in this kind of behavior are frequently threatened at work, are frequently intimidated, and will quit their jobs. So if we can give that flexibility to people in those situations to take the time they need when they need it, I think we will see some benefits, clearly see some benefits there. We also need that data. Right now, the EDD, an agency which has had lots of issues, but it was never intended to be doing the work we've required it to do. We need to expand it. We need to fund it so that they can provide us with this data. It's going to be critically important. And then, of course, we need to do outreach so that businesses understand this is good for business, so that workers understand they can take these opportunities to heal themselves, to deal with family issues like this, and to make sure that we have a healthier society and that our workforce is healthy enough that they are more effective, more efficient, that their well-being is taken into account, because that is also good for business. So I think that's 7 minutes, and I'm happy to answer any questions if they come up in the chat, or I should say in the Q&A. And thanks for letting me be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator. And yeah, we'll have plenty of time to answer some questions coming up shortly. And so to introduce and moderate the panel, I'm proud to present David Rattray, President and CEO of Unite LA. David.
Thank you, Patrick. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Senator. Thank you for your long leadership of this issue in those words. And I too want to just thank the Bay Area Economic Institute and the Bay Area Council for this important work. And thank you, Rachel, and the Blue Shield Foundation of California for investing in this work and caring about this important issue. I was honored to serve with several of my colleagues, and a few I see participating today on Governor Newsom's Paid Family Leave Task Force. We referred to the task force repeatedly, and I just want to acknowledge too, that's what we're talking about, a task force that the governor formed in the very beginning of his term to make recommendations about how to improve paid family leave in California. And I'm really honored to be with all of you today and talk about this. I would just share a couple things, and then I'll moderate some questions of some of my colleagues. But I was profoundly impacted when I really learned about the numbers. And one of the findings I saw from an earlier study is that low-income moms on welfare average only 3 weeks before they return to work. I'll just pause there and just invite everybody to reflect on that kind of possibility or that kind of reality. And what I also learned is we were all working, a lot of us, I shouldn't all, many of us, to advocate for better funding, access to quality early care and education in California and across the country for birth to 5. That providing high quality, affordable early childcare is extremely expensive when it's center-based or when it's away from the parent. And yet all the research shows us that the best thing for the child is for them to spend their earliest months of life bonding with their parent and parents. And so I was also just struck by how foolish it was for us to try to fund publicly funded childcare for a 1-month-old baby, which is extraordinarily expensive, instead of allow a parent to stay home with their new child. And so when I saw the pieces of this, it was easy for me to get motivated. Now, I'll just also share, as an employer of about 35 staff members, I've had quite a few moms and dads in my decades of work, and we have a 100% return rate. We've never lost a parent that went on leave and didn't come back. So I wasn't surprised when I saw your numbers, Patrick. If you support your parents, they will come back to you. If you do not support your parents, you will lose a lot of incredibly talented people forever to your companies and your organizations. So I wasn't surprised to see those numbers. I got to see them up close. And then just lastly, I'll just echo what your findings said, which were all consistent with our recommendations of the Paid Family Leave Task Force. If you don't reimburse at a wage that is closely equivalent to what they were making, a low-income parent can't afford to take leave and will not. And we reimburse right now at 60 to 70%. It's wholly inadequate. And so therefore, no surprise that we see the numbers you showed us. And so I'm very proud of the bill that's on the governor's desk by Assemblymember Gonzalez that would raise rates to 90%. And on an after-tax basis, 90% gets you close to 100%. That makes sense. And that's what should be so for all parents in the state. Ethically, they pay into this fund. They ought to be able to access the dollars that they paid into the fund to be able to take that leave and be able to afford basically that reality. So with that, thank you for allowing me to moderate, Patrick and team. And I'll throw my first question to you, Xiomara. So many people think that the small business community does not support paid family leave, and some of the findings you've shown us over the years show to the contrary. So I'd love to have you tell us a little bit more about what you've learned about the point of view of small business owners in paid family leave.
Thanks, David, and what a pleasure and honor it is to be here with everyone today. As mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Engagement with Small Business Majority, and we are a national small business advocacy organization. We've been around for 15 years doing research, advocacy, and education work on a whole host of different issues, including paid leave. And we were delighted to be part of the governor's paid leave task force, along with so many folks in the room today. We recognize that, a lot of the challenge that the senator mentioned has been centered around the business case as to why this may not be an effective benefit for employees and why this can pose a challenge to businesses and small businesses in particular. Small Business Majority really believes, and our research does indicate, just like Patrick and the Bay Area Institute report indicated, that not only is California's paid leave program good for families, but it is good for business and those Main Street businesses. We know that small business owners know it makes good business sense to take care of their employees. It's crucial for them to be able to retain talented workers that are productive and contribute to their business. And oftentimes for many small business owners, they don't have the resources to offer these robust benefits that larger companies can provide, like paid leave or medical leave programs. So this can put them at a disadvantage when it comes to attracting and retaining employees. You know, a small business of 6 is never going to be able to compete with a Tesla or a Facebook level benefits. And so the research does show that there is a wide support for publicly administered paid leave programs. Many small businesses already offer formal or informal leave policies, but in many cases, as folks on the call have referenced, that's simply not enough. It doesn't go far enough. We recognize that California has led in this space, but there is, as mentioned, a lot of work to be done. And I also want to just touch on something that Senator Jackson mentioned. You know, before I allow others to contribute here, I want to acknowledge that the way that Americans work and start a business is changing. This has been especially true during the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, this health crisis has underscored why today's entrepreneurs and small businesses and their employees need a modernized and robust benefit infrastructure that promotes wealth creation, financial security, and quality jobs for those who do not work for large organizations. And so when we think about benefits like paid leave, again, the bottom line is they're not just good for families and working families, they're good for business.
Thank you, Samara. Matt, you again, it was an honor to serve with you on the task force, and you had shared with us some of the members of the Bay Area Council, medium and larger companies, have been growing their paid family leave programs for years. Love to have you share with our colleagues a little bit of what you learned when you talk to some of the employers and their experience with this.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks to all of my former colleagues on the task force. It was a lot of fun working with you for that 18-month period. And indulge me for 1 minute, David. I'm going to share a little story that sort of started me on this path towards participation in the paid family leave task force. Senator Jackson may or may not remember, but it was probably 5 years ago on the, it was the California First 5 Advocacy Day. I was assigned to come visit with you, and I think maybe a couple of other of the attendees on the call were in that meeting. And we were talking to you about increased funding for early learning, and you shared a personal story about your own daughter who had to put her career on hold after having had a child. And because there wasn't sufficient high quality childcare available in her community. And you were not making an argument in favor of early childhood. You were making a gender equity argument. You were making an argument on behalf of women and their ability to advance in the workplace. That was the genesis for the Workplace Connections report, that conversation with you, which then was the genesis again, I think, for, it played a little bit of a role in the creation of the paid family leave vehicle that we're all talking about today. So it's funny how things start and where they end. It was really a happenstance conversation in your office. But from the perspective of an organization that represents employers, you know, again, we have employers from all industry sectors. They tend to be larger employers, so sort of the opposite end of the spectrum from Ziamara's company profile. But they're all, you know, for the most part, in the search for the highest and best talent. They're trying to attract and retain the highest and best talent in an environment right now where it's hyper competitive. So they're looking for not just it's not always, you know, the highest paycheck gets the best people, but it's the benefits package, you know. And is your workplace a place where someone wants to come and work, where they'll feel valued and where they will feel part of a team? Talking to some of our members, again, in working in early childhood education and through our gender equity work at the Bay Area Council, we discovered that some members, you know, that have had for years gender neutral or gender positive hiring practices for women recruits, we're still seeing higher rates of attrition among their female employees, because, you know, for better or for worse, it does tend to be the mother in a relationship who takes the time off to take care of a new baby, if in particular there are not available high quality childcare slots in the community. So for a company that's seeking to foster and promote gender equity in its workplace, it's not good enough to have hiring policies that are favorable towards women. You actually have to have workplace policies that are favorable towards women and families. And so we were getting feedback from a lot of our member companies that, while we're doing the best that we can, we need help. We need to be told, you know, what are the types of policies that can help us attract, retain, and promote women to upper management and the C-suites of our organizations. And it turned out that through the work of Patrick and his team at the Economic Institute, through the Workplace Connections report, and then subsequently the reports on paid family leave, that paid family leave is a critical component of that. I mean, if you're at all interested in gender equity in the workplace, you have to be a champion of family-friendly workplace policies and of early childhood education opportunities in the community, because last time I checked, you don't get to give babies back after 12 weeks. And if you want to go back to work, there needs to be a slot, a high quality childcare slot in the community. So I'll get off my early education soapbox in a second, but I think that is a critical piece if we're trying to, again, if the end goal is to create an environment and a state and a workplace where everyone is welcome and everyone can achieve and maximize their talents, then we have to, you know, there's three legs of the stool. We have to make sure that all are properly funded and resourced and supported.
Thank you, Matt.
So,
Senator,
David, could I just jump in there for just a second, because I want to thank you for that. I did legislation that I just couldn't get through that would have given, not major, but a little bit of a tax incentive for larger companies to have on-site childcare as part of this whole program. And you're absolutely right. People today want to enjoy where they work. And it's a challenge because, again, there's still those in the higher places frequently are of a different generation. And part of what I think we also need to do, which is why I also did legislation to allow 12 weeks of job protected maternity and paternity leave for a newborn. We need companies to think as well outside the box. Small businesses are it's a little trickier, but to have that on-site childcare in today's world, I think would be an enormous benefit and part of that more holistic view of what it's like to be a worker, an employee in today's workplace. So I just wanted to recall that. I'm sure I broached that subject too when you came in to see me 5 years ago, because I was really hot on that trail. To get some money for that as well. And hopefully that will be something that continues. And I apologize, David, for interrupting.
That's okay. Well, so I was going to come back to you with a different question, though, Senator Jackson. Put your politician's hat on. Take off your policy hat. Put on your politician's hat. I looked at several of you that are participating with us today, and you're what I would consider allies. I think we mostly have the folks that already believe in this. We need to make our tent bigger. As you know, last year with your bill, we had no votes to spare. A lot of moderate Democrats and all the Republicans voted against that bill. So with your political hat on, give us some advice. How do we build a political strategy, a political coalition to go to the next level on this?
Well, it comes from a number of different ways. One of them is, of course, the legislation I did a couple of years ago to truly poke the bear, which requires that California headquartered corporations add more women to their boards of directors. Because we bring a different life experience to the table. And having women at that table, having that diversity, whether it's gender, racial, ethnic, whatever, really opens the doors for companies to think outside that traditional box. So that's one of the things. Another thing is, and I want to give also a shout out to the small business majority, who was very active and who did a report. And I think I mentioned yesterday, I was running around trying to gather votes for the bill on job protected leave. And I had a copy, a dog-eared copy of the small majority council's report that demonstrated this was good for small businesses. We need to educate my former colleagues and educate small businesses on the fact that this is actually going to help the success of their business. There is sort of a knee-jerk reaction that says, oh my goodness, I lose an employee under leave, I'm going to go out of business. But the fact is that under our paid family leave programs and under the job protection program, the employer doesn't pay anything. Now, when it comes to new parent leave, the only requirement they have is if they already provide a healthcare program for their employees, they have to maintain it. And that's for logical reasons, because of the challenges associated with an infant, the challenges associated with having just given birth. So I think a lot of this is education. And the more we get events like this and discussions and information being provided that demonstrates this is really a good thing for everybody. It is a win-win. And while I went around and would run around saying that, and I'd hold up this report and I'd hold up the other reports, I think we need to keep working that. And I think we need more people in upper management and in the boardroom who have had this experience, whether it's caring for their children or caring for their parents. You know, California is an aging state. And so there are many of us, well, actually some of us who may be in the being cared for category at some point, not the too distant future, but certainly we are called upon as well to care for our aging parents and family members. And we need to recognize that that means it's going to affect our work life, and that businesses are better off if they are prepared to accommodate those needs.
Well, thank you, Senator. And you teed up the first question we got in the Q&A. It relates just to that topic. And I wonder, I don't know, Patrick, if you want to go first, and then we can see if anybody wants to weigh in. But it is that question about, is there data about the use of paid family leave for the care of older spouses, older parents? So one is, do we have data about that? And then I would just add the political context too, Senator Jackson, back to, we realized when we were trying to build a coalition, it was a broader, deeper coalition if we appeal to the needs that we have of intergenerational needs, which is workers that should need to take care of an elder parent. But first of all, Patrick, let me go to you. Is there some data that is available that you put in the report or that we can access on that question?
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, we do have some data around this. And over 90% of claims in any given year in California are for bonding. So it's largely a program used for bonding. Although, you know, California is a big state, and so even that 10% is a significant number of care claims each year. And as Senator Jackson noted, I mean, you know, one of the things that's frequently talked about, I joke that I'd like to have two jobs because I'm vice president of research, but I also run the council's healthcare committee. One thing we're frequently talking about more and more is what the senator brought up, and that's, you know, we're going to be facing, we're an aging state in an aging country, and it's very possible that we're facing, you know, in the coming decades, a fairly large care crisis. And so in addition to balancing their lives and work and caring for newborns and young children, more and more Americans are also having to care for older family members in other situations. And so, I mean, I think that care that's also very, very expensive to do sort of outside the household. And so I think that this is another thing that we need to think about very seriously, because it's going to continue to hamper in the coming decades labor market participation, the careers of women who caregiving largely falls to in the majority of households, and a whole host of other problems. But yeah, I would welcome others' thoughts on this. I mean, I think it's something that's, you know, kind of not thought about as much as it should be.
Any of my other colleagues want to weigh in on this question?
Yeah,
Samara, it looks like you might want to.
Yeah, I think that, I want to take a step back. This just kind of prompted me. You both shared stories, so let me just share a story here. During the pandemic, we saw something which I don't think many of us were anticipating, which is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program was expanded to also provide unemployment benefits to entrepreneurs and business owners, which has never been done ever before. In a way, we are sitting on some momentum here that has established, again, how we need a modernized and robust benefit system, a base floor, if you may, around these access to care issues or benefit issues. There's a business owner that I can think of. She's a restaurant business owner here in Southern California with 2 successful restaurants. Her husband is the head chef. And she not only had to deal with the ongoing challenges of running and operating her business at the height of the pandemic, closures, dealing with staff, bringing back staff when it was safe to reopen. But unfortunately, her mother also had some health conditions. And so she's now in a position where she is managing a business, 2 successful businesses, caretaking at home with her elderly mother, and, really just has been a champion for paid leave as a whole, even before the pandemic. And so to your earlier question, David, around the work that needs to be done politically, one, I think we need to do a better job at narrative building in this space and tying the issues in a holistic approach that enables our policymakers and decision makers to really understand the human component of how it is that these benefits impact people, business owners, workers, families, and how these issues are all interrelated. We're not talking about paid leave in a silo, but I think talking about it as a piece and a component of a larger discussion of how we provide good, high quality paying jobs, and how we're leaders here in the state of California to providing access to good, high quality paying jobs. And so whether it's the care economy, whether it's childcare access, whether it's paid leave, or looking at continued improvements on our healthcare program here in California, I think all of these issues need to continue to be interrelated. And I think in many ways, we have our coalitions set up in each one of these categories, and we need to figure out how to mobilize in a unified fashion when we're talking about significant improvements to the systems, and especially when we're talking about reframing those improvements in a way that's grounded in equity. Because I think that, I think back to my experiences, and I was a young teen parent myself. I never had the benefit of qualifying even for a paid leave program. I had a chance to take that 1 month to bond with my child before returning to school. And so for the expanded definitions work that we've done, I think about the countless families that are in a position where they don't have a significant other to lean on, or where they're in a situation where they simply can't access the benefits themselves. And so it is critical that we unify these individual issues in a way that's holistic and collective, and really paints a picture around how work is really truly grounded in equity building.
A great comment. If I could just jump in here, it's really going to take a collaboration with business really taking the lead. Business, labor. I think labor is more inclined to push in that direction, and business is inclined to push back. But if we realize that, and I also want to give a shout out to Blue Shield, a lot of this is health related. When people are feeling enormous stress, they get sick. It's just a fact. And if you don't have that sense of calm and assurance that your loved ones are being cared for while you're at work, you're less efficient. less productive, and your health also suffers, as does probably the health of your loved ones. So agreeing that that is critical and a focus, I think, is what we need in today's world. But to be honest with you, I think the business community has really got to step up and take a lead on this, because what we saw, you asked Dave, politically, really it's the business community that has been the most reluctant to step forward. And yet at the same time, labor has also, exempting public employees doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Public employees should be included in too, but the thinking is, well, we'll collectively bargain that. I don't think that's an issue for collective bargaining. I think it's a human right. You take a look at many other countries of the world, and they provide, we're talking about, you get 12 weeks to bond with a newborn. You look at some of the countries very productive economically in Scandinavia, they give their workers a year and a half. So they don't have to worry about early childcare, which is very expensive. Infants don't just grow up at 3 months old, at 12 weeks old. The cost of infant care is extraordinary, and yet we don't offer much in the way of a little longer period of time to bond with a newborn. If we really could change the way we think about this, and I think, frankly, bringing more women into this discussion and more enlightened men like the good men who are here, and I assume who are listening in, it really benefits society as a whole, and certainly the corporate world and the business world.
Yeah, you remind me, Senator Jackson, when I was early in my business career, Fortune magazine cover said the mommy track. And this was in the 80s. And it was just highlighting that if you were a mother in the 80s and you wanted to go upward in a corporation, but then you chose to have a baby, it took you off that track forever.
That's right.
And I totally supported that. But I had in the back of my mind, there ought to be a father track too, meaning if you want to be a father, you shouldn't also take yourself off the executive track. That should be a family track, right? You should be able to be successful as part of your family and be successful within your employment status. So Rachel, we have an amazing report that you underwrote. If you think about like the best case scenario, what would be your dream? What would we do with this report to make the biggest possible impact?
Well, I'm really just going to borrow from the comments that have already been discussed. I think Chiamara's point about the narrative, what are the stories? You all have shared your personal stories. I think one of the things we find to be so effective in advocacy is the sharing of stories, because these issues are so universal for families. The experience of caring for a newborn or an adoptive child, or caring for an aging parent or a sick spouse. Like, these are the things that bind us together as human beings, as the senator said. And so I think the more we share our stories, the better chance we have at achieving the kind of change we want. I think we are in a moment where we can also share this story about what workers believe they're entitled to now. We're kind of in a new consciousness, I think, with COVID, about the senator's point about balancing work and family, and we don't believe we have to sacrifice family to also do good work in the world. And I think the more we hang on to that consciousness in our culture and use it to drive effective changes in paid leave are really important. I think the best case scenario for us is really equity. The points that have been made about access to this benefit for low wage workers, whether that's because they don't know about it or the wage replacement levels aren't sufficient. I think that for us is the real frontier of change, that we really won't be successful with any paid leave program without having equity. And for a health foundation, we know that health inequities are felt most deeply among low wage earners, among people of color. And so really those who stand to benefit most from the program from a health perspective are also the ones that we're currently leaving behind. So we think about things like wage replacement. The job protection success is huge for workers who find themselves feeling very vulnerable in their employment situations. The more we can expand, the number of weeks of paid leave. I know, really the debate right now is 12 weeks minimum. Like, that's the minimum. I know we could get to a year, that would be fantastic. But I think this no exemptions, universality, we need all businesses on board. We can't have these exemptions in terms of employer size. We know that there are large concentrations of workers of color and women of color in small business. And so, something like an exemption for small business has an equity implication if that's where workers are concentrated in those businesses. So I think, for us, designing for equity is really the frontier of change. And I think we have so much to build from in California on that front. And I think this point about allies, there's, again, and that goes back to the storytelling. I think we've shown what's possible, that the sky doesn't fall, when we make these kind of changes, business doesn't suffer, and families are happier and healthier. So I think what we've done here is shown what's possible. And I think that just tells us, the sky's the limit in terms of where we can go.
Thank you, Rachel. So we just have a couple minutes left. I'm going to suggest to my panelists, maybe we do like a rapid fire. Everybody gets about 30 seconds for just the final thoughts they have about it. And again, to all the participants, thank you for coming today, but I'm going to thank you in advance. Please read the report thoroughly. It's a really fantastic report. And then send it out. Have a goal of saying you're going to send it to at least X hundred people that because I think that this is what I would like to see, is this report get out there and then build a fire underneath it. So I'm going to go real quickly through each of you. Senator, I'm going to give you the last word. Tamara, what's your final thoughts?
Well, I'm really excited to have contributed to the discussion today, for all the great work and research work that's outlined in the report. I think Patrick mentioned this, but getting access to EDD data is no easy feat. And so being able to really digest it and look at what the program has, how the program has unfolded over the last 20 years and what lessons we could learn, not just to improve it here in California, but in other states that are looking at also mobilizing to implement similar programs. And especially right now at the federal level, being something that is very close to having a monumental impact for, over 100 million individuals who currently don't have access to a program. So, I'll take a note from you, David. We will be sharing it far and wide through our coalition of partners and business owners, because I think that access to the information is a key component to being that part of the narrative building that needs to take place in order to drive that change.
Thank you, Zamara. Matt?
Yeah, thanks, David. I would, have to maybe address what Senator Jackson said about the business community and playing a key role in making this happen. And she's absolutely correct. And if you look back at the fight that we had to get her bill passed, business organizations in California that are progressive on other issues came out hard against the bill. And I think it was in large part driven by a lack of understanding, a lack of data that was available to them to make the proper case. And the benefits of paid family leave are a little squishy, they're a little esoteric, and businesses were convinced by the upfront burdens, the costs. I'm going to have to give my people how much time off, and I'm going to be exposed to what kind of litigation risk through job protection. So they were only seeing negatives and not really being given an adequate argument on the positive side of the ledger as to what employee retention, employee productivity, employee loyalty, all of those things that are in this report and in the previous report. So I think the conclusion I would take away, if we're to politically build friends and influence people and start to build an alliance for paid family leave, more research, more data. The more we can make fact data-driven arguments to the business community, I think we'll start to whittle away the opposition, and we'll start to bring more groups over to our side, and people who are logical people, and we can bring them over by data and not scare them about the potential downside costs, which we know are minimal, and the benefits we know from the data are almost endless.
Senator Jackson, I didn't manage this well. You have about 30 seconds to say final thoughts.
We need to change the culture of work in our state, in our country, to accommodate the 21st century needs of people. We have more women in the workforce. If we want to continue to procreate the human species, we've got to recognize and accommodate those needs with our workforce. We've got to make it equitable. Business is a partner. Business should be, as you suggest, Matt, right up front. We need more data that demonstrates this. We need to get the word out regularly and consistently and constantly, and see that change that I think we all agree is necessary.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Patrick, I'll leave it to you to close us out.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Senator Jackson, Xiomara, Rachel, Matt. Thank you so much to everyone who's on. My final thought will be, I'm available. We're here. Everyone at the Institute is here to get you facts and figures and numbers and attend webinars and get the paper out and help with the fight in any way we can. So thanks again, everyone. And it's a pleasure.